I want to write about Koe no Katachi. I mean, I knew this would happen, that I'd start watching the film and be lucky to get through the entire thing before a fresh Google Doc opened up against my will. That's why I put off watching this film for so long. I've got too much stuff to do to lose a day to manically throwing together a video, and yet, here I am. Keiko made a video on it, so I finally had to cave and go watch a video on it, so I finally had to cave and go watch it, so now it's 5 AM on a Thursday, and I've got a 15-minute video for Jeff that I should probably start editing because it's due at 5 AM on a Friday, and by a Friday, I mean tomorrow Friday, and don't worry everyone, I'm a professional, I swear. So maybe I don't want to be writing about Koe no Katachi, or at least not at this moment. But I want to write about Koe no Katachi. And that's an interesting position to be in. Actually, to be accurate, it isn't at all interesting. It may be interesting only for how remarkably uninteresting such a predicament is. There has been a veritable flood of videos on this film, or really more of a healthy, consistent stream, because not only has this film compelled seemingly every AniTuber who watches it to make a video covering it, it's done so in such a deeply touching and inspiring manner that these people have put immense amounts of work into finally polishing these labors of love down to a crystalline sheen, leading to the uploading of some of these videos coming months after the film has been out, in spite of the process of creating those videos being started almost immediately upon its release. But that's an interesting position to be in. I want to talk about the emotions, and everyone's already done that in extensive detail. It is inherently one that will elicit an emotional response from many people, and for those of us who have turned to creating YouTube videos as a means of figuring out how anime makes us feel, how it makes us feel, or getting other people to connect with how anime makes us feel, or making money off of making people feel a connection with us because they feel a connection with how we explain how we feel a connection to what they feel a connection to, a film such as Koe no Katachi will inevitably have this effect. We've gotten multiple videos going into the brilliant cinematographic craft, multiple videos digging into its wonderful music and overall sound design, and more human-centric, cathartic pieces. But I don't want to talk about the emotions. Most of the time when I do, I end up hating myself for it. As things are, when those emotions have to go through all the filters of being written out, and then looked over and cleaned up, and then read into a microphone, and then gone through and edited together to get the best takes and leave good spacing between all the lines, and then listened to on repeat 20 times in 5-second intervals as I slide the clip around trying to find the optimal frames to start and end it on, it can't help but feel as if conveying a reaction is inherently manipulative. With the amount of time I spend with those words, they're far removed from actually being reactionary. Instead, they're a carefully selected and cleaned up premeditation. In a society that often applies the blanket designation of edgy to genuine and literal accounts of what someone's emotions were, doing so in video form can feel crude, blunt, or shallow. Really, the fact they've been covered so extensively already in this case frees me up for Koe no Katachi, and instead I can talk about what shocked me most when I watched this film, because I'd seen no one discussing it. Koe no Katachi is blunt, and it is crude, but it's far from shallow, and in fact this unrestrained forthrightness it presents itself with is specifically what lends depth to what it says. The film starts with Shoya tearing the days he does not plan to live to off his calendar, saying a final goodbye to his ex-employer, selling off his possessions, visiting his suicide spot to imagine that event, and marking off his final day, before we head to the flashback. Next up, for Shoko there's of course the shockingly and disturbingly unrestrained bullying. The amount of revelry her peers take in engaging in that activity underpinned by what is in context an incredibly darkly upbeat backing track. What was even more shocking, and perhaps more fundamentally unnerving however, was how totally unprepared the school seemed to be for someone like Shoko. Here we've got a deaf girl sitting in a class lecture that's done nothing to account for her circumstances, and what? It's up to a classmate to interpret that for her on the fly? Then we're back to Shoya, and a heartless brutalization of this kid. Critical responses from some complaining about things being overdramatic and over the top, of being unrealistic and shallowly emotional, of exploitatively relying upon suicide and being, yes, edgy, were inevitable. In 1986, a 13-year-old committed suicide, describing the bullying that had brought him to that point in a note he left. He had been beaten, threatened with death, and a teacher had organized a mock funeral put on for him by his classmates. This became national news, and alongside other similar cases around this time led to an organized effort to combat bullying in Japanese schools. Today, the the leading cause of death for Japanese kids ages 10 to 19 is suicide, and the most common date for that is the first day of school. The number of reported, not estimated, cases of bullying in 2015 was 224,540. People studying the issue have theorized that because of the uniformity often emphasized by Japanese society, people who stand out become targets, and everyone else becomes obligated to join in on this targeting, which is why bullying is much more commonly a concerted group phenomenon in Japan, as opposed to other places where bullies are more often a handful of individual antagonistic figures. Koi no Katachi is a confrontational film. It is a brutal one, but only insofar as being honest about the subject matter it tackles necessarily requires it to be so. The fact that it joins together one of the most ceaseless successions of emotional blows, and one of the most rock-solid defenses of the validity of taking the approach it did of any film I've seen, is something that's powerful. In general, it's powerful because it results in characters that go through deeply emotionally affecting stuff, who we can nonetheless totally buy into because that tragedy feels genuine instead of being artificial, over-exaggerated, or unjustified. But while the irony of getting this personal with things in a video discussing my hang-ups about doing just that is not lost on me, the most impactful part of this element of the film is much less universal and more specific to me. Those doubts that will plague most YouTubers are made all the worse because I can't really recount emotional experiences with a clean conscience. For me, years of repression mean that even just experiencing emotions feels like a heavily filtered process of artificial reconstruction. In videos I put up only a few months back, you'll see me somewhat clumsily attempting to explain what I've since seen put much more eloquently as a sense of detachment or estrangement from one's own thoughts, feelings, or body. The thought, I know I have feelings, but I don't feel them. Having an ongoing, coherent dialogue with yourself. This takes things from a question of, is telling people what I felt manipulative, to, is telling people what some other self removed from my conscious experience felt manipulative. But, hold on. Taking a step back from this cross of YouTuber martyrdom I'm preparing to nail myself to here, I think this internal conflict actually is a more universal one, and one that Koi no Katachi itself explores. For both Shoya and Shoko, the thing they weigh themselves down with throughout the film is this question of whether their own feelings are justified. In their case, it isn't a matter of wondering just how genuine those feelings are, but rather an immense amount of responsibility and guilt they feel. Shoya over the harm he's done, and Shoko over the burden she sees herself as. For Shoya, all the suffering is something he almost welcomes, as some kind of karma or atonement for his past actions. In Shoko's case, she doesn't want to create even more inconvenience than she views her mere existence as causing inherently. I think that at a basic level, sharing our feelings and experiences is simply a scary thing to do. People, men especially, are told to avoid emotional reactions and expressing them. And for everyone, doing so outside of specific contexts is a sign of some shortcoming on their part. We all experience them, but if you share yours, the other party may open up and be receptive to that, or they may maintain the illusion that they don't have emotions, and mock you for the fact that you do. Everything else is a justification added on top of that. I deserve to have to deal with this. Others don't deserve to have to deal with this, even in cases where those others may have hurt you in a way that caused it. People become a threat, as they did to Shoya. They might elicit emotions, they might witness them, so you retreat into yourself or maintain shallow, half-hearted relationships. Shoya had withdrawn himself so fully that until his mother snapped him out of things, he was reacting to her talking about his suicide attempt with detached, non-committal responses. What it took to change that was her own emotional outburst, something that at its basic level took Shoya by surprise and concerned him, sure, but which at a more fundamental level gave him the security to himself express some of those emotions. Koi no Katachi conveys this message, and I'll second it. Embrace and express those emotions. But just being told to do that may only go so far. In recent months, I've been able to find and bond with people who do express those emotions, and it's the most personally enriched I've ever felt. Having people be emotionally open with you drives home the point that doing so is okay, and also gives you people with whom you'll be able to feel that security to do so. If you're comfortable with it, be that encouraging example to those around you. Shoya eventually becoming receptive to Tomohiro gets me every time, and you can be that for someone else. As is customary for these videos, I'm obligated to end with the point, Koi no Katachi is a film about how people communicate, and give my personal little takeaway from that. Koi no Katachi is a film that explores those things that we are afraid to communicate. It leads by example with its own bold presentation of its heavy subject matter, issues that are characterized by a societal tendency to attempt to downplay and obscure them. Then, it presents us with characters who, through their struggles with those issues, teach us about the dangers of rejecting the communication of our emotions. The fact that so much of the film involves what's almost a reverie in intense character-driven catharsis, a specialty of director Naoko Yamada, is an embrace of that communication, unrestrained by fears of the inevitable claims of trying too hard that approach will elicit. And the emotional openness that the positive reaction to this film has had is the greatest possible validation of the value such a thing can have in empowering others. And man, did this film empower me, because certainly in terms of the editing at the least, this is probably the most work I've put into any video I've done. And such self-indulgence on my part is only made possible by my Patreon support, which meant I could just put 3 videos out and be fine, instead of having to crank out this and my next one half-assedly before month's end. A huge thank you to Car Keys, Skylar Morrow, Nareto64, Magic Dragon, Mackenzie Knowles, Keiko Cat, Christian Emery, Presto Puma, Laugher Style, Omifomi, Garbage Burner, Ducky, Marcus Gand, Sam Velociraptor, Tyler aka Gigs, Shoko Asahara, Lord Liquid Bacon II, Izumi69, Kieran Rice, Valkion, Tincho37, Taktoa, Cherry Boy Writer, MathWiz97, Joji Matthews, Culver James Kamai, Shafty, Zardos Tenjin, Saiker, Zeria, Macaulay Wentz, Sakamoto Mio, and all my other patrons for helping with that.